First of all, it's Yud Adar Sheni. Yesterday was Shabbos, which obviously means we didn't have a class. But yesterday was Tes Adar Sheni. It's 76 years since the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America. Yesterday, 76 years ago, the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived in New York. I don't know what day of the week it was, but it certainly wasn't Shabbos. And he set foot on American shores. And by the way, for those who think a little bit, it was 76 years that he came to America, and 30 years before that, exactly 30 years before that, they left Lubavitch. The Rebbe Rashab left Lubavitch. Pashas Vayera, Tafresh Ayin Vav. The Emirishon of Pashas Vayera, Tafresh Ayin Vav. In other words, 105 years ago, the Rebbe left Lubavitch, and they started their journey into what the Frierdiker Rebbe used to call Asara Golias Goes to Lubavitch. It's a 30-year period from. No, it's not 30 years. It's 24 years, 23 and a half years from when they left Lubavitch until the Rebbe came to New York, came to America, and settled in Crown Heights. And the Rebbe made it clear that this is it. From here we go to Mashiach Tzidkenu. In other words, there's a lot of stops, but this is the last stop. Here we go to the Gula Mitzvah Vashlema. The thing which is so compelling to me is the whole Lubavitch is 101 years. Lubavitch, the city of Lubavitch is 101 years. 102 if you stretch it. And Crown Heights, 770 is 76, which is 3/4 that amount of time. 3/4. Yeah, 3/4. In other words, you think of Lubavitch as being forever, and this is like a hiccup. Right? There's people in this room who were Be'elam Hazeh, Be'chaim, Chiyas B'Amadein, when the Rebbe arrived in New York. But it's 3/4 the amount of years that Lubavitch was the Ir Abira, as the Rebbe calls it, was the capital of Chassidus. So now Brooklyn, Crown Heights, for 3/4 that amount of time is Ir Abira. Now, of course, we don't want to wait, Chas v'Shalom, for Crown Heights to equal and to exceed Lubavitch before Mashiach comes. What the Gula Mitzvah Vashlema? We're going to have the Gula Mitzvah Vashlema. Take off from a Yad Mamish, but it is interesting. It's just how long this tkufa has been, where the Rebbe came to America, and to use a quote that I saw from the Rebbe Sasiche from 40 years ago, 41 years ago. The Rebbe said in Yud Shvat, Tavshin Lamed Hey, the Rebbe said, the Rebbe der Schwer ist gekommen in Amerika und ist geworden der Rebbe über die ganze Welt. That's a direct quote. I think it's word for word. The Frierdiker Rebbe came to America and he became the Rebbe over the whole world. The Rebbeim were always the Nesiye Hadar, the Rebbeim, the Nesiyim. In other words, they were the Neshama Klolos of the whole generation on a spiritual level. But in terms of their practical hanhogim, in terms of their leadership of Klal Yisrael, it was very different. It was only in Russia, and until relatively recently, it was only Chassidim. Chabad Chassidus is a very exclusive Chassidus. Chabad Chassidus was the least populous, not because there were no people, but because it was too intense. Chassidus Chabad is a pneumistic Chassidus. It was not meant for Amcha. Lubavitch had a lot of adherers. Lubavitch had an enormous number of adherers, but not nearly that many visitors. If you would go to Ger, or you would go to Tzadins, on a Yom Tov, you would meet tens of thousands of Chassidim. There was never such numbers in Lubavitch. Never. Because Lubavitch Chassidim were Rabbonim, Lubavitch Chassidim were Shochtim, Malamdim, Mashpiyim, and Gvirim. Those are the 5 classes. In other words, the average Lubavitch Chassid never saw Lubavitch. Never saw Lubavitch, and never saw Lubavitch Rebbe. He was a Lubavitch Chassid. What kind of Chassid is that? In your shtetl there was a Rov, there was a Mashpiyah, there was a Malamed, there was a Sheikh, there was a Gvir. And he took your notes to Lubavitch and he brought back the answers. Because going to Lubavitch was very difficult. The people were very poor. And in Lubavitch they didn't serve kigel. There was nothing. In Lubavitch it was Teda, that was it. And Avodah, versteht sich. So Gdeis Chassidim went, and the Rebbeim, the Nesiya Yisrael, the Rebbeim ruled the world, ruled Russia in a pyramid, really, in a pyramid system. The Rebbeim were very, very careful about who they appointed as Rabbonim of the Kilos of Anash, of Chassidim, and the Mashpiyim, and the relationship of the Rebbeim to the average Chassid was through an intermediary. I've told this to you before. My father's father, I remember well. His name was Dave Bader. When he passed away, I was 10. but I was very close to him. My grandmother spent a lot of time in the hospital, and I spent every Shabbos with him. I spent a lot of time with Adar, Olav Shalom. And I always asked him the same questions, and he always gave me the same answers, and I kept asking the questions, because I didn't understand the answers. I said, was your family a Lubavitcher family? Yeah. Your father was a Lubavitcher? Yeah. Was your grandfather a Lubavitcher? Yeah. How far back? Till the Alter Rebbe. Okay? Now, for my father's mother's side, we have a shaykhas to the Beis Harav. My father's mother's mother was a Pevzner. That means she was a direct descendant of the Alter Rebbe's brother. Alter Rebbe had a brother whose name was Mishpacha name was Pevzner. All the Pevzners, all the Poisoners were all related. My father's mother's mother was a Pevzner, but my father's father was a Yid, a shtetl Yid, and we come out Poshet Yid. So my next question was, so how often did your father visit the Rebbe? He said, never. So I couldn't, a boy in Brooklyn, in the modern, I couldn't understand how you could be considered yourself a chassid. Your father was a chassid till the Alter Rebbe, you never win Lubavitch. I couldn't understand it. So the best answer he gave me was he sent my brother to learn Tem Chetmimim. My grandfather's brother was a Tamim. Okay, so Rabbi Yankov Orale is a famous chassid, a Tamim. His children were also very famous. A lot of them were killed al Kiddush Hashem, al Mesiras Nefesh, and so on. But that was his connection. I said, how could you be a chassid? So my grandfather would try to explain it. My grandfather was a Yid from previous generation. Of course, we spoke in Yiddish, aber von deswegen, wie viel hat gegeben zu verstehen, I couldn't understand. And I would ask him the same questions over and over again, give me the same answers. I would ask him to tell me stories, tell me the same story. No, chamal, no, chamal, no, chamal. It's okay, it's beseder. But that's what it was. Chassidim didn't go to the Rebbe. They couldn't afford it. And they wouldn't really get anything in the Lubavitch. Unless you were shaykh to Chassidus. And v'eid v'hu ha'ikit, aveda pnimis, a poshterid, went into a shul, and there was a mashpia, who Friday morning learned Lakota Torah. And Friday afternoon, Chazar Chassidus v'tem Shalashulis. And Motzei Shabbos, they made, like it says in the Hayem on Lava Malke, in the Haizef and the Chassidim, where they would sing Al Tira the Yankev and eat a piece of herring, and they tell the Maisim from Baal Shem Tov. This was Chassidus. Yitzhak Kislev was a big party, but the average Lubavitcher chassid was never in Lubavitch. In other Chassidus, everybody went to the Rebbe. Why? Because the primary reason to go to the Rebbe was for a bracha. And brachas everybody needs. In Lubavitch, you didn't come to Lubavitch for brachas. In Lubavitch, you came for Torah and Aved. The brachas were few and far between. It was not the derech of Chassidus of Chabad. So the Rebbe came to America, the Friedrich Rebbe came to America, and in the words of the Rebbe, he became the Rebbe over the whole world. And released Sofik Sveika, his whole Rabbistve changed. Not Chas v'Shalom that they gave up Chabad, but they certainly expanded Chabad to include a lot more than Chabad. I Baruch Hashem made a shidduch, and my mechutin is it's a big schus that I covered. Is Yosef Weinberg's son, Levi Weinberg is my mechutin. And he happened to be in America. He lives in South Africa. He was here for the L'chaim. So we had a couple hours to verbringen. Every time I meet a new chassid, I right away ask questions. The tail lepers. So one of the stories that he told me, I once heard it from his father, from Yosef Weinberg, Alav Shalom, but he repeated the story with more pratim. And I also managed to forget the name. Rabbi Weinberg used to travel to South Africa in the 40s yet, to raise money for the yeshiva. At the tale that the Friedrich Rebbe Marangirufen, Yosef Weinberg, the Friedrich Rebbe called him in. He was the menal of the yeshiva in Chicago. There was a Tem Chetmimim in Chicago, and Rabbi Weinberg was the menal of that yeshiva. The Friedrich Rebbe called him and said to him that Ashag Matetzech, that Ashag is having a very hard time, and he asked Rabbi Weinberg, as Ozainzem Le'ezer or the Saad, I think the Lashon was. Le'ezer or Lachi Somach. He should help Rashag, and that's what he did his whole life. He helped and he raised money for the yeshiva. It was an incredible fundraiser. It was B'chala. Rabbi Weinberg was a Metzuyin. He was just one of those people, was gifted with an incredible presence. And he was a real Kiddush Hashem and a Kiddush Lubavitch. And that's how the story, the Friedrich Rebbe asked him to work with Rashag, and that's how it was. There's other Sipurim, how the Friedrich Rebbe came to him in a dream years later and asked him to work for the Rebbe. Also, I'll tell you that story a different time. But the story that I want to tell you, he went to South Africa by Friedrich Rebbe. And in South Africa there was a Tomim, Shenit Chametz. There was a Tomim from Lubavitch who was not from Kipshuter. And he knew him. Just about everything we can. And when he would visit, he would come to see him. I don't know who went to see whom, but Chacha Fili wasn't from. Tem Chetmimim was still by him a nikir. And so after Yud Shvat, Rabbi Weinberg came again, and he came to see him. Gewollt Herr Nachsidus von Nein Rebbe. This is a guy, he wasn't from anymore, but he learned in Lubavitch. Gewollt Herr Nachsidus von Nein. He wanted Yosef Weinberg should chazif Mamaimed from the Nein Rebbe, from the Rebbe Manayach from Nein Rebbe. So he came and heard Achsidus from Nein Rebbe, and of course Rabbi Weinberg came to raise money for the yeshiva, and then Rabbi Weinberg took out a dollar bill and told him that this is from the Rebbe. I remember Yosef Weinberg telling this story. He says, I used to come to South Africa, and this Yid with Makabel Ponov, and he had Chazigi Tzatskit. He wrote letters to New York. I meet this Yosef Weinberg, it's mamish like Lubavitch, yeah? Then he comes after the Rebbe becomes Rebbe, and he gives him $1. He says, what's this? You're asking me for a lot of money for Terech Tzim. You give me $1, it's $1 from the Rebbe. He says, are you nuts? Since when did the Rebbes give out dollars? Since when did the He concluded, a Polish bleibt a Polish. This was the conclusion. He was 100% sure that Weinberg took his own dollar out and gave it to him and told him, because it was not Elal Daite, that the Rebbe should send him $1. Because it was Bechlal not part of the Lubavitch Indian. And he was convinced, he repeated to other people, he gives me $1 and he tells me it's from the Rebbe. I should believe him also. This is a story. It gives you an idea of how much it's changed. And the Friedrich Rebbe and the Rebbe expanded. Lubavitch, Chabad. You know, there's a Lubavitcher Chassid, there's a Chabad Chassid. Every Yid in the world today is a Chassid of the Rebbe. Beheida b'leida. And the Rebbe is a Rebbe to each one based on their Madrege. There's still Chabad, but there's much more than Chabad. Much more than Chabad in the Rebbe. Because like the Rebbe said about the Friedrich Rebbe, the Schwede kommen in America und geworden a Rebbe über die ganze Welt. The Friedrich Rebbe came to America and he became a Rebbe over the whole world. This is 76 years ago. It's a long time. It's technically almost 4 generations. And the Mirat of the Gula Amit is Vashlema. And this is I don't know how to say this is the final frontier. It's a frontier where the Sea Hador is machnes es atzmei betachsisi mulchama. He doesn't leave the work for anybody else. Machnes es atzmei betachsisi mulchama. He personally engages in navigating and governing and directing the war. If you read the Sichas from Friedrich Rebbe from the early 20s in Russia, the Friedrich Rebbe says, I became a Rebbe and I was given a task. And my task is to teach Chassidus and to encourage Chassidim to turn and Aveda Pnimius, do Pnimius de Kavoida, and to encourage that in all the cities and the villages there should be Chassidus, there should be Teire Eid and Kuta Teire in the morning, and there should be a Maimer Batog, and there should be a Malava Malkim at Shabbos, and there should be Fabregni Nishna Shabbos Mevorchim. That's what a Rebbe's Indian is. And then I see that all the Rabbonim, Yeshi, Almidim, and Atlafim from front. Peter Rebbe writes, I see that all the Rabbonim who were supposed to be the Kavranatir, the captains of the ships of the various cities that they were designated to govern, ran away. This is the early 20s. And I look around and I see Einish. All the people whose responsibility is to stand and fight for Yiddishkeit have run away. So the Rebbe said, I have no choice but to put aside Karmi Shali, the Indian for which my neshama came into this world, I'm not able to do, to spread Chassidus. And instead, I have to worry about Rabbonim and Shochtim and Alazachen, and of course, above all else, Tineke Shal Beis Rabbim, the Chinuch of Yiddish Kinderach. So the Friedrich at the very beginning already says that this is not my shlichus. My shlichus, what the Rebbe Rashab wrote in the Tzavah, was not that he should worry about Mekvois, and not that he should worry about Tineke Shal Beis Rabbim, not that he should worry about Kashas. He should worry about Chassidus. What about all the other Inyanim? For this, there's Rabbonim, and there's Rashi Yeshiva, and there's Gedeli Yisrael, there's a whole hierarchy of Jews, but everybody ran away from the Maracha, so the Rebbe said, I did it myself. And this started a new era, the Rebbeim, instead of their traditional role of being involved with big Choshev Rabbonim and Greis Chassidim, who in turn were involved with other people, so to speak, in what you would call a pyramid system. All of a sudden, there's a seder that the Rebbe is involved in the intricacies of Maisa. I saw a sikha from the Rebbe. Could we even learned it here? But the sikha from the Rebbe, I think we learned it here, where the Rebbe told a story that the Rebbe the Shver got a letter from a chassid, an elter chassid, and a geheben chassid. And in the letter there was a complaint. What's the complaint? That in his city is a younger man. A young man, Tomim, a younger man. And this young man is doing all kinds of Yom Avaskanas. And he gets letters from the Frierdiker Rebbe Nachanan all the time. And this Elter Chassid, who was Mastama Chassid, that Marash, I don't know, wrote several letters to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe did not answer. And the Rebbe says, this Elter Chassid was Shalei Be'erech, the younger Chassid. It wasn't just Gaive, and he was Taka of a Hecher Madrege. And the younger Chassid was not the same Madrege, the Elter Chassid. So the Frierdiker Rebbe writes him a letter. It says like this. He says, you're right. I should answer you first. But we live in such a time that I have to put all of my priority into Asiyah, into Maisa. And since he's young, and is a person of action, his letters get answered first. Not because you don't deserve an answer, but because the Tzav HaShah, the time mandates that you have to put aside, even in Yonim Pnimiyim, and to focus entirely on the Yonim of Asiyah Le'ela, Maisa Bepel. This letter was written almost 100 years ago. 95 years ago, 96 years ago, I think it was Pei Beis. A long time ago, 94 years ago, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote such a letter. The Rebbe read the story in the Splurging, that the Rebbe wrote such a letter then. So it's a whole new chassidus. Why? Because the Rebbe is busy with, my Yisrael Hashem Shushman tells that he walked in some Rebbe before the Nesias. He walked into the Rebbe was before the Nesias. And the Rebbe's table was a mess. It was a pile of things. People saw the Rebbe putting the labels himself on the tux and tails and the stamps to send them in the mail. You imagine? People saw the Rebbe himself mailing the tux and tails to little kids, one at a time, putting the stickers. People saw witnesses, they saw this. I mean, the Rebbe let people help him, but people saw the Rebbe do this, but Yodav Avdeshim, Kipshutei Mamre. So my dad walked in, he was involved in printing, and the Rebbe sees him, and he macht, hat laleim tzarchit tzibur, macht mitnan, hat laleim tzarchit tzibur, burden them with tzarchit tzibur. The end of the Ma'ameh Chazal is nit as a geschmack. In other words, how a person becomes nothing because of tzarchit tzibur. So the Rabbeim, this was in the Basiligani, machnisim es atzmam, v'tachnisim b'chama. This is a time that the Rebbe is concerned with things that used to be the business of Rabbonim and local Askanim, and the Rebbe has to do it all himself in plain words, because Ein Lehem Mamish Yismeichel. There's Pashat nobody else. The Rebbe has to do all the things that in an earlier generation, a tzaddik, a Rebbe, a Nasi B'Yisrael was very far away from. He appointed a Rav, who appointed a Sgan Rav, who appointed a Sgan Laskan, who was involved in the kind of things the Rebbe has to concern himself with personally. And then there's the second thing, that Mevaz Bizim Kol Ha'itzis. Believe it, right? This is the second idea you have in the mind, that there's nothing that the Rebbeim keep. The treasure. I have a shiur Sunday morning with a younger man, Nitken Lubavitch, very interesting person, a doctor, a very big chochem, and we learned Tanya. So this morning, in the middle of learning Tanya, I took out a sikha. I interrupted the limud. We learned Tanya inside, and I made copies of a sikha, and I sent it to him, and we learned the sikha of the Rebbe, which is negayah to the Peirik Tanya that we were learning. He's a Bal Nigle, he's a Ventera, he's not a Chassid. So Faket, Nigle speaks to him more than Chassidus. He wants to learn Chassidus, which is why we're learning Chassidus, but Nigle speaks to him. So whenever we learn a Sikha, there's Ha'ares and Nigle, he gets... So he asked me about the Sikhas of the Rebbe. So I told him that the Revaile, so far in print, there's over 100 Krochen of Teres Menachem, and when they're finished, it'll probably be 170 or 180 volumes of Teres Menachem, maybe 200, and that's besides for the Likutei Sichos. And I said to him, and this was done by a person who wasn't exactly free. It wasn't like he had nothing else going on. But besides for this, the truth is, when you examine what the Rebbe did, the Rebbe does, the Gemara says, "Am Eisprach lav dein bar inish." Das ist nicht kein Mensch. Warum ist kein Mensch? You know, a tzaddik is a größer Mensch. A größer tzaddik is a größer Mensch. There's a category. It's nicht kein Mensch. Nicht kein Mensch. It's not possible. I said to him, how much the Rebbe gave in his Torah, and I said, you know how many sichas are lost? How many things possibly were not recorded? It's also a hamoin. It's not the Rebbe's Torah's bli gvul. It's mamish bli gvul, and he wasn't telling stories. He wasn't saying pshatach. So emes a Torah, and it's just so much. And again, this is a person who 3 nights a week started people in Yechidus, wrote hundreds of thousands of letters, bli guzme, and ran the world. Wie hat outside? Wie kann das ein Mensch dort? Yes, did the Rebbe prepare? I said, yeah. They found notes. I said, but the Rebbe's notes didn't include Madam McCamus. The Rebbe didn't include sources, just topics. They printed many, the Rebbe used to have in the back of his siddur rubber bands, rubber bands. And in the rubber bands there were papers. Many times by Fabrengen, the Rebbe would open up the back of his siddur, take a look. We didn't know what the Rebbe was looking at, but we now know the Rebbe used to write notes before Fabrengen, but it was a half a page, and the Rebbe could talk 8 hours. How do you read half a page of notes and talk 8 hours? Because he only wrote topics. He didn't write a single manamak, Nishka Gemara, Nishka Medrash, Nishka Zayed. All of that was memory. It's half of a fella. It's not half of a fella. It's just normal. It's nicht normal. Not normal. Anyway, but my point is, the Rebbeim before didn't do this. The Rebbeim, the one thing about the Rebbe was, you couldn't even keep up with his Torah. Think about it. Rabbi Gringlas, I heard from a relative of mine, that he learned in Montreal. Rabbi Gringlas was a chassid, Gadol b'Yesod. So Rabbi Gringlas hat verbracht mit sie. Und hat sie gesagt, that am Friedrich in Rebbe is given a maimer. Friedrich was a maimer. There wasn't even a maimer every Shabbos. It had to do with the Rebbe's health. It had to do with the fact that the Rebbe was around. But when there was a maimer from the Rebbe, that maimer preoccupied them day and night for weeks. They heard the maimer, and they reviewed the maimer, and they memorized the maimer, and they learned it, and they learned it, and they learned it, until there was another maimer. You know, in a good year, the next maimer was the following week. But on average, how many Mamam the Friedrich Rebbe say in a year? The Friedrich Rebbe didn't say 50 Mamam a year. He probably said 25 or 30. The Friedrich Rebbe's health was B'mdida V'agbola. And so, almost like gekocht in Maimer, he says. Today, you open up something that the Rebbe gave you, and you start to learn it, and the next thing arrives. You don't have time even to properly learn between the Likkutei Sichos and the Maimorim, and then comes the Fabrengen. It's a Hamoin Rav. It's so much that even if you're Taka Chassid, and which Chassid does not want to learn the Torah of his Rebbe, how could it be that Rebbe gives you a frische Torah in Chodesh Katzait? I was reading, the B'tzion Shem Tov couldn't take it. When he saw Chassidim learning Likkutei Torah, he would go over and close the Likkutei Torah and say, here, this is also Likkutei, it's called Likkutei Sichos, learn this. He couldn't understand how you could sit on the Shabbos morning when the Rebbe gave a Likkutei Sichos and you're busy learning Likkutei Torah. Ebbets the Gang in 11, he couldn't handle it. And he would go over, I mean, the B'tzion Shem Tov is a character that's well known. He would close the Likkutei Torah and say, no, this is an old Likkutei. Now there's a new Likkutei Sichos. But there was so much of the Likkutei Sichos, it came out every Shabbos, you didn't even think twice about it. You B'chlal didn't pay attention to the Isa Meifus. This is historic. The Rabbeim gave Torah with such regularity, you always knew it was going to be there. And then there was a Lasicha and a Mugadik Sicha and a Bilti Mugadik Sicha. Unashid, unbelievable. You could have no greater business. We're learning now the Torah that we missed. Yeah, I wasn't born in Tafshin Tazayin. It's not normal. It's pushed as though you feel. And you say to yourself, what kind of chassid are you if you haven't learned the Torah of your own Rebbe? And the answer is a very small chassid. Why? Because it's so much. It's so much Torah. And this is all Derech Hagav. A Mesnagid once told me, the greatest isn't the Rebbe that he said a Rambam. That he said a Rambam b'Havlah. It was a piece of Fabrengen Zachakel. He was Fabrengen and he spoke about this and that. Well, not Rambam. Rosh Hashiva appears such a Rambam 6 hours. And by the Rebbe it's a Derech Hagav. One of the many things he mentioned of Fabrengen was a Rambam. And so, there's a Bizbaz Ha'etzis. And of course the last thing is Mashtachai Mineged, which we also have in the Maimid, and unfortunately we have to dem Zeche Gewesen Nechet, like the Rebbe spoke in Tafshin Yud. So in any case, today is this is a Hemshech to Tes Adar. In case you walked in late, this is where this is all started from. But yesterday, 76 years ago, the Rebbe came to America, and it begins a new Tkufa. He says, right? What's the Gematria of 76? Anybody a Makubal in the house? What's 76? Huh? 76. Chasdoi. Chasdoi. Wie viel ist Chasdoi? Ches Samach Dalet Vov. Ches Samach Dalet Vov. Wie viel? How much is Chesed? Chesed is ein base. Right? Chesed is 72. So it's ein Ches. Okay, I'm off by 2 numbers. Okay, no, forget, erase that. Yeah, we have bonus. Yeah, okay. Yarem is Nishrem as the Rikir is. It's such a long time since the Rebbe came to America. It's a new kind of Chasidus. It's a Chasidus which is about changing the world. Mamish, ve'emes. It's not stam azeh. We could sit here in Crown Heights and feel proud of ourselves, but it's a Chasidus. I have a nephew who made an opshanish in Ghana, Africa. Ghana, Africa has 4 little kids. You don't know what Ghana, Africa is? He made an upshenish, a beautiful upshenish. He didn't have his father there, he didn't have his mother there, he didn't have his brother there. It was so heartbreaking, so beautiful. You see how happy they are. And imagine, you make a simcha, and not a single relative is physically present with you. Just this morning, that's where it's at. Adar Sidas. This is where it's at. This is where the Rebbe is. And this started 76 years ago yesterday. And the bottom line is we have more patience. We should look
at the 76 years, though, the change from when Lubavitch started, the Alter Rebbe, till America, we didn't have such change. In these 76 years, the change in the Rebbe's Messias, like you said,
it's enormous.
Reaching the whole world.
Right.
Right. And the change in the world. Yeah.
The change in the world, it's the same word here.
The accessibility of Chassidus, of the Rebbe, to the whole world.
The kayach. But ich sag noch azachechet. At this point, many misnagdim are ashamed of themselves.
Of themselves or of us?
Of themselves. Because they understood that they should not have been fighting with this person. There's a recognition that the Rebbe is bigger than Chassidim and Misnagdim. I always think of this. The Rebbe said the first Maimer. The Rebbe said the first Maimer, yeah? And he mentioned all the Rebbeim, beginning with Alter Rebbe. Clapped. Why? Chabad. 2 days later ago was Shabbos. He said a second Maimer, and he mentioned the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. And after that, every year, Basi Lagani, he mentioned the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. So, how did the Rebbe explain it in the Sikha? The Rebbe explained it in the Sikha by saying, I thought it over. Why did I start with Alter Rebbe? Because by my chasene, the Friedrich Rebbe started with Alter Rebbe. So I figured the Friedrich Rebbe started with Alter Rebbe, I should also start with Alter Rebbe. But then I said to myself, I thought it over. I said, why should I start with Baal Shem Tov? Now what do you think happened? I'll tell you what I think happened. The Baal Shem Tov and the Zitcher Maggid showed up and said, Lama Negoda. We don't have a shaykhis with this, but only the Alter Rebbe has a schus to be mentioned. Only the Baal Shem Tov, Maggid English. So the Rebbe, that's how I understand the story. Understand? The Baal Shem Tov says that, like the Rebbe Rashab wrote about the Chabad, he teires Baal Shem Tov zal. Will sich Dinge mit dem Rebbe nicht mehr sagen, but with the Rebbe nobody can argue. Anyway, okay, this was a very, very long speech. It wasn't supposed to be so long. But yesterday was Tessa Desheni, so we verbring it with Tessa Desheni.
So the Hayom said the point about that it's not enough to see and touch the Rebbe, that you have to learn his Chassidus.
Right. Yeah. But Dikir is the Rebbe's pula. The Rebbe said many times that if Lubavitchers won't do what he wants, others will do it. The work is going to get done, if not by us, by others. Okay,